It's round 5 of the 7th season of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship, and for the first time, Formula E is racing in Spain at the DHL Valencia E-Prix. A very good morning, a very early morning. We are up almost before the sunrise, quite frankly, to bring you coverage of this first 45-minute session, which will be the drivers' first proper attack on the Valencia circuit in this format. And this is how dark it was when they arrived earlier on today. I promise you that's Antonio Felix da Costa, really loving the early mornings, as you would expect. The two Jaguar drivers, Sam Bird and Mitch Evans, arriving, the top two in the championship. And there is Jean-Eric Vergne arriving this morning. They're all quite chirpy, aren't they, considering just how early it is. There we go, a bit more stern looking from Sebastian Buemi as he and Norman Nato arrived to the track together at probably about 5:30, 6 o'clock. It's a little bit brighter now, but it's not exactly but a bright sunny day yet in Valencia. Hopefully it will turn into that a little bit later on. These are how the championship standings look coming into this 5th round of the series. Sam Bird and Mitch Evans separated by just 4 points at the top of the championship, but 13 points separate the top 7. It's incredibly tight. The top 6 will be going out in the previously dreaded Group 1. You've got big hitters down the bottom. Sebastian Buemi with only 11 points. Lucas di Grassi with only 6 points. Jake Dennis and Andre Lotterer, the two drivers yet to get off the mark this season. And obviously with Jaguar being 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship, as you might expect, they are leading the Teams' Championship as well. They are comfortably clear of Mercedes EQ at the moment, with DS Techeetah in 3rd place. 4th are Envision Virgin Racing, BMW I Andretti at the bottom of the table. My name is Jack Nicholls. We're joined this weekend, very luckily for us, by Karun Chandhok, the former Formula E racer. And Karun, this Valencia circuit is going to be a sort of new challenge in Formula E terms.
Yeah, lovely to be here, Jack. I mean, it's a whole new challenge for these drivers in terms of, you know, other Formula E tracks, which traditionally, of course, have been on street circuits, apart from, I think, Mexico. But this is also a circuit that they all know very well. There's a few changes to the layout. You've got a chicane at the top of your screen there, which we'll get to see once the cars are out on track, which is in a different position to where they have it in testing. And also to the right of your screen, there's a double left and then into a double right sequence of corners, which is also different to what they had in testing. So a little bit of a change, but this is a circuit that drivers know very well from not just Formula E testing, but in all the other categories of racing. You know, it's a track that gets used a lot for testing and racing.
Yeah, there are a few drivers that have raced here before. You think of Lucas di Grassi has, but a long time ago, almost sort of 10 or 12 years ago. Here you can see the run down towards turn 1. The green is where they're going to be regenning, and there's going to be a lot of regenning around the circuit, but this is a bit of a closer look at the track. Yep,
turn 2, a fairly tight hairpin, should be comfortably flat through 3, 4, 5, a really flowing section there. Turn 6 has been modified from the normal track just to create a little bit of a braking zone, and this is where we've got the attack mode for the race, where they get to use an extra bit of power for 4 minutes, and then here, as I mentioned, that chicane towards the end of the lap.
So that is the Valencia E-Prix circuit. You can see the sort of original layout in there as well, and where the Formula E track differs, as Karun mentioned, 3.376 kilometers, and free practice is going to be starting in just 35 seconds. Air temperature 12 degrees. It's not too cold here. We're expecting perhaps a little bit of rain later on today, which will be very interesting, but this is the driver who is at the top of the standings. Sam Bird, 43 points. He's had 2 DNFs this season in the 4 races, but the other 2 races he finished 1st and 2nd, and consistency is what everybody is looking for in Formula E. Stoffel Vandoorne nearly had it in Rome last time out. He was leading the 1st race, won the 2nd race, but it's that consistency across a season that the teams really struggle with.
But I think, you know, we're at still a relatively early stage of this season as the cars all come flooding out of their garages. The light at the end of the pit lane is going to turn green just as they coast up to it. The two Techeetah cars seem to be at the head of the queue.
Yeah, the light went green actually about 18 seconds late, so I think that's why there's the bit of confusion, because you're not actually allowed to leave the pit lane or leave your garage until the session starts. But there's a look then at the big, long, sweeping first corner. DS Techeetah as the reigning teams champions, the first out on circuit at the end, and it's getting lighter a bit quicker, but already Da Costa just snatching the front left brake as he came into turn 2 there.
Yeah, I mean, it's still quite cold at this time of the day. It's only 7:20 in the morning here in Valencia. And what tends to happen when you first drive out of the pits, these brakes, they don't work. You know, anything below 300-400 degrees, they don't actually work very well. And what you get is cold grab, where they just snatch. The retardation, the way it slows the car down, actually isn't very good at that point. And that's why you'll often see people locking up on the outlap. Once you get a bit of temperature into it, that should all be a little bit better. We can see most of the cars have come straight out on track. You can see 4 or 5 of them still in the pits, which, you know, I think at this stage, it's all about the drivers. You could, you know, getting a feel of where the attack mode is. You see one of the Nissans going out there to just see where, I think that was Oliver Rowland having a little look at where the attack mode was, just on the outlap. But at this stage, all they're trying to work out is the consumption numbers. So this is about race running. This isn't about lap times necessarily. It's about how much energy do they need to get around this track in race mode.
So let's go for a look at the track then with Antonio Felix da Costa down towards turn 1. It's a long straight, and you can see the two Diez Techeetahs already presumably practicing a little bit of slipstreaming as they come down into this first corner. The entry has been narrowed by putting that wall on the entry, and then this is going to be the main track limits place on the exit of 1. Although it feels like the kind of corner that it's not that on the edge in terms of track limits, but if it is there, you would abuse it. Does that make sense?
Listen, anywhere you've got a bit of extra width, if you were allowed to use it, you would use it. Because as soon as you straighten the steering wheel and you take off any load and any scrub, immediately you're more efficient. As soon as you turn the steering wheel, you're sapping energy. And therefore, you know, the drivers will try and exploit every little bit they can. The exit here of turn 6 is another place where they would have liked to go out onto that green bit, but, you know, rightly, they've got to stay on the track, which is hopefully all we're going to talk about, track limits, and we can never have to mention it again.
Attention all teams, this is race control. Full course yellow in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Scott Elkins,
full course yellow,
the race director, doing the practice full course yellow, as we do at the start of every first free practice session, just to make sure all the procedures are in place. There he is there, the one with his finger on the button. Always has his finger on the important button, does Scott Elkins.
And this is useful for him and his team at the FIA to make sure that the systems are working. But it's also useful for the teams and the engineers, because they want to know how much energy is being consumed during these, you know, full course yellow periods, when you're obviously going a lot slower. You know, it differs from track to track, of course. So, you know, this is all just useful data gathering for the engineers, which doesn't sound exciting, but it is all very useful. You know, when we get to the sharp end of the day,
attention all teams, full course yellow ending in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Green flag, green flag.
They can go back to full speed now, but and again the two Diez Techeetahs right together. And I think there's also going to be, especially in Rome, a lot of the teams struggle to get clean running in, basically, and do the required programs that they wanted to do in free practice because of the tight, twisty nature and the issues with traffic that you had in Rome. Whereas I don't think we're going to get that here. It feels like the teams might be quite, or some of the engineers especially, quite excited to get some real proper data at a circuit that they have a lot of data at already, as we see Sebastian Buemi currently down in 16th in the standings, didn't score any points in Diriyah, a 5th and a 10th in Rome after he got a time penalty for a collision with Lucas Di Grassi. Someone's screeching their tyres, aren't they, as they come up into that left-hander, but been a tough start to the season for Buemi.
Yeah, he's on the back foot a little bit, isn't he? You know, you've got a championship here where there's such a strong field of drivers and teams. All of a sudden, yeah, as I mentioned before, we're in the early stages, but if you're already a whole chunk of points behind your key rivals, people like Sam Bird, people like, you know, we expect the Mercedes drivers to be at the sharp end. They've been very quick, but their DNFs and crashes have sort of ruined their current positioning in the championship. You know, Buemi and Di Grassi, frankly, and Lautra, you know, these are drivers in good, strong, competitive teams who are further behind. And yeah, it's a big challenge for them to come back. But just looking at what's happening on track here, Jack, I think, you know, just speaking to people in the paddock yesterday, this sounds like a track where the slipstream effect is going to be huge. You know, one of the drivers mentioned to me this could be a bit like a cycling peloton, where really they all drive around in a queue, and you don't want to be the leader because the one at the head of the queue is burning up the most amount of energy. And it's quite cool to see the teams, some of the teams, you know, sending the cars out together, DS Cheetah doing that, to practice and see if the car in second in the queue is in fact using less energy. And you know, getting those numbers is going to be useful for them later on.
Yeah, we've seen some real slipstreaming races, especially I think of Marrakesh and Santiago in season 5 last year. Actually, no, it was start of season 6, wasn't it? And they were really, you didn't necessarily want to be the driver at the front of the queue. Max Günther waiting until the sort of last lap to overtake Antonio Felix da Costa for the win, having sat behind him and conserved energy the whole time. Because it's tough, because when you are, presumably when you're at the front of the queue, you don't want to, there's not an easy way to give that up. If you're in second, it's easier to sit in second than sort of make that decision to lose the lead, let's say.
But it's about playing the long game.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm a big fan of cycling, and you look at it, and you know, so often you have the situation where the person who wins the stage or wins the race actually only leads the last 2 meters, not even 20 meters.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen here, because I think, you know, but I do believe that you don't want to lead necessarily the first half of this race. You want to kind of let the other people do the donkey work a little bit.
Sergio Sede Câmara has had his lap time deleted for going off the track at turn 12, so that's what is the final corner on the circuit, but for our purposes it's the penultimate before the chicane, as we see Jake Dennis now, one of 2 drivers yet to score any points. Had an absolutely just an unlucky weekend overall really in Rome. He was wiped out in the practice crash with Oliver Turvey and Jean-Eric Vergne at the end of pre-practice 1 while he was waiting to do his practice start. That put him on the back foot because he didn't manage to do pre-practice 2, so then qualifying was a challenge, and then he was about to go out in qualifying for race 2 and the car died, so didn't get to qualify.
The cars in front.
Copy. Then you can cool down from now. Next lap was planned to be cooled down anyway.
And the man from Nuneaton has now caught the back of the cars in front, he was saying on the radio to his engineer Brice Gaillard. And so Dennis is an interesting driver, because so many of these, it goes either way when you know, impressive drivers come into Formula E. Either they hit the ground running and you're like, wow, okay, this is serious, or they do take a little bit of time to get up to speed, and Dennis is in that latter category at the moment, despite him being superbly impressive over the course of his career. And another one of those drivers is Nick Cassidy, who's kind of the reverse. He's looked really impressive in all of his qualifying so far this season. Nearly made Super Pole in his first race, but there was a yellow flag out for Sede Câmara's crash. Obviously had that pole position in Rome and then spun at the start, which was not the greatest moment for Cassidy, but he's an exciting talent, I think.
Yeah, I really rate Nick. You know, he comes here with a huge pedigree of racing. Most recently, of course, in Japan, and it's a tough championship, the Japanese Super Formula, and he was also doing Super GT. So, you know, he's shown some good versatility in his driving by getting in and out of different cars. He's, you know, prior to that had a solid career in European Junior Formula racing, a podium finisher, of course, at Macau, which I think is always very telling of a driver's ability. See the brakes glowing in these you know, in these colder temperatures. They've really worked quite hard to get some temperature into those front brakes.
Sam Bird's an interesting case in this session. He's on an outlap now. He's done 4 laps, but they all appear to be installation laps. He hasn't actually set a lap time at any point during the session. Not that it's particularly notable at this point in time, but it's a little interesting one as you look at Sylvain Filippi there, the managing director of the Envision Virgin Racing team. And there is Sam Bird coming into the tight right-hander in the middle of the circuit at turn 9, and the right-hander again at 10, and then swings through the left-hander at 11. But Sam Bird at the top of the championship, and there'll come a point this season, won't there, where the questions will start to be asked, is this
So
Sam
track
Bird's
limits
year?
warning for turn 1, Sam. Track limits turn 1.
That's ridiculous. I was getting out of everybody's way.
So Bird obviously has got out of everyone's way at turn 1, and Phil Ingram being told that he's getting a warning for track limits. So there we go. Phil Ingram, a racer himself actually in various championships in the UK, but Bird's always been a front runner in Formula E, hasn't he? Well, he's always been almost a front runner. You know, he's just been never quite had that sort of championship challenge maintained right to the end of a season.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's one of the few drivers I think who's done every single race now, hasn't he?
Yeah. It's just him and Degrassi now.
Yes, I guess so, because Buemi missed a few, obviously, to go to do Le Mans thing. So, yeah, you know, he's tremendously experienced in this championship. There's, you know, there's been success in terms of race wins all the way through. I think to put a championship challenge together in Formula E, you do need a dollop of luck as well, don't you? Because typically in a street race with you know, a whole bunch of cars charging into tight corners, there will be an accident somewhere that you'll get caught up in.
Yeah.
And, you know, like Felix da Costa was saying to me yesterday, he said last year, you know, a whole bunch of people would hit each other and I would just find my way through, and all of a sudden I'd be safe.
Yeah.
And he said this year I seem to have the opposite. And he was right, you know, I like Antonio because he's quite candid about the fact that he had luck on his side last year, as much as performance and speed, which obviously he had in spades to win the championship. But you do need that slice of luck, I think, especially with street races.
So Sam Bird at the top of the championship, as you see the tyres getting changed on Max Günther. But while Bird is at the top of the championship, Lotterer at the bottom of the standings at the moment. Only he and Jake Dennis have failed to score points in the opening 4 races of the season. Not without trying, though, for Lotterer, obviously, and had a front row start in Rome, went for the lead of the race up on the opening lap. So the pace is there, but it's just not quite coming together yet in terms of points. And when you're on 0 points and Bird's on 43, that's when it starts to get you know, you need to start getting points on the board sooner rather than later.
But when I'm watching the races from home, you know, he's the driver I most expect to get his elbows out.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, you know, I'm sitting there waiting, almost waiting for Andre to have a go and have a lunge, and he's not afraid to do a bit of bumping and banging past somebody, is he? And, you know, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And you know, I think this weekend we should, you know, you'll have less of that because you've got a big, wide open track. And the energy management is going to be massively critical here. So I actually think in some ways this weekend, because of the nature of the circuit, it puts the onus a little bit back onto the efficiency of your cars. You know, obviously the drivers, you know, there's a great deal of skill involved in terms of driving quickly and efficiently with the energy. But I think here, having the most efficient package in terms of your car and hardware could be more critical, perhaps.
Well, that's something that the Neo 333 team have been working on a lot, because they really struggled with efficiency last season, were at the back of the grid, didn't score any points, but both Blomqvist and Oliver Turvey have scored points this year, as Tom Blomqvist here comes into turn 2. He picked up a 10th and an 8th in Rome in what was a quiet weekend for Blomqvist, but him and Turvey really getting the job done at Neo in what is probably the slowest, or not the second slowest car on the grid, but they are really getting the job done. Blomqvist, a talented young racer, raced with Esteban Ocon and Max Verstappen in the European Formula 3 Championship a couple of years ago, and was pretty much an equal to them, so a lot of talent.
Yeah, you know, another driver with strong single-seater credentials who's Obviously gone away from single-seaters a little bit to go to DTM and sports cars and things like that. But he, as you say, for a team like NIO, who, you know, they've gone through a bit of a change of ownership and a restructure in recent times, having drivers, somebody going very slowly there, Jack, on the outside. I think it was one of the Dragon cars, but going very slowly on the run up to that left-hander. Can have a look, but yeah, just finish my point. Blomqvist and Turvey, I think, are the two right drivers there, because they're a pair of safe hands.
Yeah,
you know, they can be relied upon to give the team consistent performances and feedback and results, and that's kind of what a team that's rebuilding really needs.
Sergio Sette Camera in the Dragon is the driver that I think might have stopped on circuit now. He's showing us stopped on the timing screens. Hello, Christian. Always happy to give us a wave. Is Christian Silk, the team principal, and that is outside of track limits, but it's also churning up the gravel there for Lucas de Grassi. So he's exploring the outside of the track, and so at corners like that, track limits aren't being monitored in the way they are at turn 1 because the gravel is there. So a little bit of a moment for de Grassi, but nothing too dramatic for the Brazilian. So you look at the Audi Sport Abt Scheffler squad. De Grassi, 18th in the championship, would have been much higher had he managed to win the first race in Rome that he was leading before a drive shaft failure. And now here's Alex Lynn for the Mahindra team. His teammate Alexander Sims finished 2nd last time out in Rome. That promoted him up to 9th in the championship, whereas Lynn's 8th place in the first race in Rome are the only points he has to show for the 4 races so far, after 2 crashes in Diriyah and then a 17th place finish in Rome. Looking quite lively through that final corner at 12.
Yeah, he's pushing on this lap, and you know, you can see he's using plenty of weight. You see other drivers not necessarily using all of the width around the track. You know, they're still giving it a little bit of a margin, but Alex on that lap at least seemed to be pushing on a reasonable amount. At the moment, obviously, lap time's still a little bit irrelevant because they're all on different programs and trying to hit different energy targets. Having said that, the top 6 are within 0.2 of a second, so yeah, it's already looking pretty close up there.
And it is Robin Freitz who's at the top of the times at the moment. The driver who's 3rd in the championship, took pole position and was quickest in group qualifying in the 2nd race in Diriyah, and finished 4th in Rome, but he's 3rd in the standings. Since he joined the Envision Virgin team, he's only finished in the top 5 or outside of the points. It's a real hit or miss kind of career, I suppose, for Robin, because he hasn't finished in a 6th to 10th place finish since the Montreal E-Prix at the in the first one of those at the end of season 3. He'd missed season 4, admittedly, but yeah, I think he finished about 7th or 8th, and apart from that, he's top 5 or not scoring any points, which is interesting when you look at that in terms of Pascal Wehrlein as an example. 6th in the championship, okay, got a 3rd place in Rome, but apart from that, he's finished 5th, 10th and 7th, so he's scored points every race, but he's not bringing in sort of the big hauls that you're seeing Sam Bird get with a 1st and a 2nd and then 2 DNFs, and I find that that kind of juxtaposition quite interesting, really.
But you kind of get that, I think, because of the format of the weekend, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, sorry, I thought there's some team radio was coming there, but you know, if you look at the people who get the big points early on go up in the championship table, but because of the group stage of the qualifying, when they're in Group 1, then they get the low because they maybe qualify outside the top 10, then they get caught up in incidents, and that's why I think you get these peaks and troughs rather than the flat. Oh, big snap of oversteer there for what's that? Okay,
Eduardo Mortara.
Mortara, wasn't it? No, it was the Dragon car in front of him.
Apologies, that'll be Nico Muller.
Muller, yeah. Muller had a big snap of oversteer there before turning into the left-hander, but got away with it. Mortara. So, having started the day where they were all running around, you know, in slipstreams and trying to practice that a little bit, they've sort of spread out a bit now, haven't they? So, you know, I think the drivers have kind of got an idea of what it's like in the slipstream. Now they just want to get on with their own program.
Okay, and they steered off track in turn 1.
We just saw the end of it, didn't we, as Mortara went off the circuit at the first corner, saying he understeered off there. He's in attack mode at the moment, is Mortara, with the blue lights flashing on the halo just above his head. He's pushing on, isn't he? Giving it some beans on this one. He's at 235 kilowatts of power. Oh no, his reading is 200, even though he's got the attack mode flashing. There's an interesting one. So, see what's going on with Mortara. Max Günther has come through the first sector 2/10 quicker than anyone else, but the lap times will be continuing to drop, and we'll really have a look at them when they do their full power runs towards the end of the session. As Mortara, a driver who's been really actually quite unlucky this year. After the opening race where he finished second, he wasn't able to start the second race in Diriyah because of the crash that he had in free practice that damaged the car so much and meant that all the Mercedes powertrains had to miss qualifying, and then he couldn't get out to qualify in the first race in Rome because of a mechanical problem, and then did save of the season actually at the end of the second Rome race to hold on to 4th place, which was a strong finish. Lucas di Grassi back in the pits and on charge before he goes out for his final run of the session, the second half of the session. But this is what happened to Edoardo Mortara then, down at turn 1. This was him understeering off the circuit, as he said.
Yeah, just carried way too much speed coming into it and ran out wide. You know, he's testing the limits. That's what this practice session is all about. You know, if he did that in qualifying, obviously his lap would be deleted. So the drivers all need to understand and see where those limits are. The track here, because it's a permanent circuit that gets used for testing in other categories, it isn't going to be that dirty. You know, you're not going to have the leaves and the dust and the oil from trucks and buses like we get on street circuits. So actually, the grip level here should be a lot better straight away, and the evolution in terms of grip through the day will be much less. So the drivers are able to push on and get a decent feel of the car balance, because often what happens is when you get to a street circuit, you've got to be a little bit careful. You know, when you first drive out and you think it doesn't feel right, and you could start changing the setup of the car, but actually what you're doing is, you know, you're chasing the circuit then, because you change the setup, but the track's gotten better by the time you go back out. Then it's not quite right. It's not quite, you know, you have to. Ooh, Muller had a lock up there and completely missed the first apex of that chicane. But yeah, so you know, on a street circuit, you've got to be a bit careful not to chase the track and keep changing the car to suit the conditions at that time. You have to be a little bit calmer in your approach and think ahead. Whereas on a track like this, you can actually set it up for that run, you know, if you see what I mean. You know, you come back and say, well, it's not quite right here, and do a change. And it will still be a relevant change. So there will be a different approach. Already you can see on the tires there, the inside shoulder, you know, just how much more you see the wear that is going to pick up, you know, on the top. But the tires will wear more on the circuit because the corners are faster. The surface is going to be more abrasive. The teams have been given an extra set, haven't they, across the 2 days because of that, which is going to come in quite handy. So, yeah, it's an interesting and a different challenge for all of these teams and drivers this weekend.
Alexander Sims in the Mahindra. And here is Stoffel Vandoorne, who is 4th in the championship standings, winner of the second race in Rome. For me, was the sort of driver of the weekend in Rome, because he took pole position in race 1, and a really, really top quality driver, Stoffel Vandoorne. His teammate Nick De Vries sort of stole the headlines as we look at Ian James, the team principal, in the opening round in Diriyah, with taking the first win of the season. But Vandoorne looks really, really strong. Even in the first race where he got punted back down to 13th, he'd got back up to 5th by the time he ended up being caught out in that crash.
Now, I mean, I really rate Stoffel. It always confused me what happened with him and McLaren in Formula 1, because you know his run up to those 2 seasons alongside Fernando Alonso was brilliant. You know, his junior Formula career was absolutely stellar. He, you know, he did a one-off cameo where he stood in for Alonso and scored points. You know,
qualified Jenson Button.
Yeah, you know. So it's no surprise to me that he's come to Formula E.
Yeah, I can do. I mean, tires are suffering anyway, so, but yeah, we can try.
Okay, not sure what he was asked to do by Marius Meyer-Dietrich, but saying that the tyres are suffering, which is quite interesting. But yeah, came into Formula One very impressive, but it just didn't work out, did it?
Yeah, but that's what you know, it's no surprise to me that he's come to Formula E and is one of the front runners straight away. And similarly for De Vries, to be honest, you know, Formula 2 champion, you know, both. I think the Mercedes EQ have got a very strong driver lineup, arguably probably the strongest driver pairing, I think, despite the fact that, you know, in terms of experience, if you look at the likes of Bird and Buemi and, you know, Degrassi, people like that, they got much less Formula E experience. I think, you know, alongside DS Techeetah and Jaguar, I think Mercedes are probably the other one with, on balance across both sides, of the strongest lineup.
Yeah, it's a really, really strong outfit at Mercedes EQ. And they are second in the team's championship at the moment, 18 points adrift of Jaguar, sorry, 17 points adrift of Jaguar, as Edo Mortara comes into turn one, and he's continuing to look lively here, is Edo. Right up to the gravel on the exit of that left-hander there, and Susie Wolf on the left-hand side, the team principal of the Rocket Venturi team. And Alex Lynn is back in the pits now for Mahindra. Van Dorn is at the top of the times, 4/10 clear of the rest of the pack, but he is actually running in attack mode now to set that lap. And in the next sort of 10 minutes or so, we'll start to see some of the full power runs, I would have thought. In fact, Nick De Vries might be doing one already, or he might have been testing his fan boost, I think, on the run down towards the first corner, as Nick Cassidy gets ready to head out on track and continue with his day as Antonio Felix da Costa comes down. So yeah, Van Dorn in attack mode at the moment at 235 kilowatts, and he looks like he's starting to push now, Stoffel Van Dorn. And there is da Costa coming up towards turn 2 in the DS Techeetah, locking that left front. This will be the second race, or the second weekend, for DS Techeetah with their new team. So with their new car, I should say, the E-Tense FE21, after the all-commanding performance last year from da Costa. And as you say, he's such a sort of humble guy, isn't he? Like you were saying earlier on about the luck, and I asked him about, you know, how would he sort of sum up his season so far, and he's like, well, pace is there, so I'm not too stressed. Results haven't been there, but you'd rather have it that way around than the other way around.
He is such a lively character, a very, very good driver, obviously, across his entire career. But I think he's also just a very pragmatic guy. You know, he's honest and realistic and pragmatic about the way he does things. It's a great graphic here on the right-hand side. So, you know, you can see the amount of power they're using, plus on braking and regen, how much energy they're putting back into the battery. So, yeah, it really illustrates how important both sides of the transaction really are in terms of, you know, spending and earning power.
Da Costa moving out of the way of someone on the run towards the first corner. Oliver Rowland goes to the top of the times. The timing line is back there, by the way. The start line is at the front of the grid, but the timing line is on the exit of that final chicane. New front wing and nose for Mortara. It's an interesting one because there's not really much changes you can make to that. So maybe he's clipped a wall or something somewhere, potentially, Mortara. It's not going to be they're all sort of spec parts, those, so it's not like you're trying a different front wing or something. So
yeah,
interesting one for Mortara. There is Lotterer in the Porsche. You can see some of the walls that have been put in place as well around the track to sort of give it that street circuity feel and to eliminate some of the troubles with exit of the on the exit of corners. So here's Lotter again, who is only running at 200 kilowatts again. So there's maybe some kind of issue with the halo lights at the moment, because the lights are flashing. He should be in 235, but it doesn't look like he actually is. So there's something going on there. Get to the bottom of that. Blomqvist and De Grassi. Is De Grassi starting a full power lap now in the Audi, coming down towards 1? No, you think he's just doing a fan boost test. Freitz coming through turn 1. Look at all that rubber flying everywhere. That's something you don't really see in Formula E, honestly. Freitz off the road, obviously.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's going to be one of the features of this weekend, really. The fact that the tyres are going to be wearing more. You know, you've got these tread blocks. Basically, they are, you know, of course, they're not slick tyres. They've got tread like you would have on your road car. And what happens is, on a track like this, where you got high speed, and you see De Grassi, you know, these flowing corners that he went through there, through turns 4 or 5. The blocks start to move. You know, you get this certain amount of movement, and then the chunks of rubber start to come off the edge of the blocks, and that's why we'll get these marbles around side. Big lock up there for De Grassi, and he was nearly, may as well have just gone into the attack zone, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Was this the first time you raced non-slick tyres?
I mean, in my very first season of racing in India, we had you know, treaded tyres.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I guess in every other form of motorsport, you use the groove tyres when it rains, but apart from that, it's always on slicks.
Did it feel noticeably different, or do you just kind of get used to it?
Well, I think the reality is when we, you know, the very first ever test we did in Formula E at Donington,
the tyres are at least your trouble.
Well, everything was different, wasn't it? You know, the one that caught me out was, I remember going out of the pits, and I could suddenly hear things, you know, like you'd hear rattles and bits and pieces, which you went, oh, there's something wrong. But all of a sudden you had to work out that actually you were hearing the suspension, you're hearing the gearbox and things like that, which probably happens on every other race car, but because you couldn't hear the engine, there's no engine noise, you suddenly heard all of that. So that was what actually was the biggest surprise. I think, you know, at the end of the day, whatever tire you're on, it's all relative, isn't it? You know, you're driving to the level of grip you've got, and whether you're on, you know, I did a bit of testing for Red Bull on the groove tires at the end of 2007, and yeah, again, you know, you're driving to exploit the level of grip you've got underneath you, whatever the tire is, whether it's a slick or it's a fully treaded one like this, or you just have, you know, 3 grooves running across it.
Nico Müller here in attack mode by the looks of things. Roland still at the top of the times, 5,000ths quicker than Alex Lynn. And there is the attack mode activation on the outside of that corner at turn 8. Müller, who had a bit more of a difficult weekend for the Dragon team in Rome. They looked very impressive in Diriyah, qualified very well, but efficiency is their main issue in that powertrain that they've been using since last year. So I think it's going to be a tough weekend for them in Valencia, for the Dragon team, as Müller weaves his way through the chicane at the end of the lap and out across the line. Goes into 9th place for what it's worth, 0.8 of a second back from Oliver Roland. With 10 minutes left on the clock, it won't be long before drivers start really turning it up to full power and going for a qualifying sim, I would have thought. Jean-Eric Verne is not having a good time out there. Max Günther, meanwhile, is coming into the chicane and has just caught the right front a little. Nothing too dramatic for Max Günther. And the BMW team, who, again, Günther saying pretty happy with the pace of the car, but just haven't scored a huge amount of points. He scored double points in Rome, did Günther, with a 9th and a 5th, but BMW at the bottom of the team standings, as we see Norman Nato, another driver with good single-seater pedigree, and was 3rd across the line in Rome, but used too much energy over the course of the race, and as a result was disqualified. which maybe was just that little bit. Well, actually, Venturi, it seemed, were quite lucky that the safety car came out, because they appeared to be going for a lap shorter race than everyone else.
Right. So if
it hadn't been that end
he
safety
wouldn't
car,
go that close anyway.
No, exactly. They probably would have run out of energy. So it was a tight one, and that's one of the interesting things as well. Now it's gone to a timed race. Is trying to judge how much energy you'll need at the end is really quite challenging for the engineers as the race is going on, and then you get a safety car, and then you get energy reduction. But let's go on board then with Da Costa for I think he's just started to back off on this lap, hasn't he? He's on a cool down lap now as he comes into one.
Yeah, he's backed out of it. You can see he did a lot of coasting there down the straight. So where's Da Costa at the moment? Down in P12. So we have a look in the BMW garage.
There is Max Günther. Sebastian Buemi has gone full power. You can see the purple lights flashing as he comes up to turn 2, and this is going to be our first full power run. Buemi, who's struggled a little bit compared to his teammate Oliver Rowland in qualifying so far this season. Buemi's best an 8th place in the second race in Diriyah, and that was the only time that he out-qualified Oliver Rowland this year. It's 3-1 in terms of qualifyings between the teammates. Doesn't quite work as a direct comparison because there's groups to take into account, but quite often Buemi hasn't been out in the first group because he hasn't scored many points, so it's an interesting one.
I'm trying to think back, and I could be wrong here, but the last time I raced here in Valencia, the end of 2007, Lucas and Buemi were in that race, and I think they were teammates actually. ART in GP2, we all did a GP2 race here, so they feels like a lifetime ago for those two, isn't it? The rivalry that's unfolded in their Formula E career since then has been well and truly on. But Sebastian hustling the car a little bit as he comes out of turn 12, lock up into the chicane. Managed to get the nose into the apex though, so it wouldn't have cost him a whole heap of time. He should go to the top of the times with that lap, and he does, of course, with a 27.5. But that's the early benchmark. Rowland on a lap as well as Van Dorn at the moment. So both of those drivers also, as you mentioned, Jack, with now just under 7 minutes to go. You see Sam Burr, they're putting another set of tyres on, which is slightly surprising to have or maybe they're just checking something and putting the same tyres back on. But I wouldn't have expected people to use a second set this early in the weekend, because you know, clearly tyre wear is going to be an issue, and you probably want to keep a fresh set for, you know, for the race, or as fresh a set as possible for quali in the race.
Yeah, it's interesting because usually you're trying to, on a street track especially, you're sort of trying to balance out the wear on all of them and have them all at about the same level, because sticking a new set on for qualifying doesn't really have the same effect that it would do in other series. But with the tyre wear we're seeing here, it might be different. Here is Oliver Rowland. You're absolutely right about Buemi and Di Grassi, teammates at ART in GP2 in 2007, which I didn't know actually.
Yeah, but Sebastian only joined halfway through the season that year.
Yeah, Mikael Ammermuller and Mikael Elishin were the other drivers.
Yeah, well, Sebastian and I were the two Red Bull juniors that year. That's how I remember when he rejoined. Well, he joined the series. So he's gone a 10th slower than Rowland, but Van Dorn, fastest of anybody in Sector 1, done a decent Sector 2, about a 10.5 down on Rowland's time. So they're sort of nip and tuck. It's going to come down to the run through the final chicane. No lock up there for Stoffel. This is a great camera angle here, looking from the front right wheel, and he goes a second, 65 thousandths behind Rowland's time. So the lap times are coming thick and fast now. De Vries on the first two sectors, a little bit quicker than Van Dorn at the moment. So here he is coming into turn 12. The brake disc glowing there as he jumps on the left pedal.
Yeah, but there is something going on with the car. There's something going on with the car, man. And the car is pulling like crazy, man. I have 200 degrees brake split. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right.
Okay, so that's Van Dorn's radio. Across the line comes De Vries to go 4th quickest, 0.2 slower than Rowland. But 200% brake split, says Stoffel van Dorn, whatever that means.
I think 200 degrees. So what he's talking about is, on the steering wheel, they get a display showing the temperature of the brakes. And if you've got a difference of temperature, it clearly means that one is working more than the other. And therefore, when he hits the brake pedal, the car will veer off to one side, you know, based on which temperature is hotter or colder. So he's clearly got some huge imbalance there, which he's not happy about.
So Antonio Felix da Costa on a full power lap coming down towards the first corner. Roland's time is the time to beat, a 1 minute 27.460. As da Costa comes up now into turn 2. He will be going out in Group 2 qualifying. Later on, Antonio Felix da Costa. Of course, qualifying coming up later on today, and the race as well, or the first race of 2. And his first sector is over a 10th up on Roland, so this is looking good for the DS Techeetah.
Yeah, very smooth. When you watch his steering inputs, I always think that he's one of these drivers who's got almost a sort of minimalist steering style. You know, he uses, compared with someone like Andre Lotterer we saw earlier, lots of aggression, lots of inputs. You know, da Costa is quite minimalist in the way he turns the wheel. You see a little bit of oversteer there as he changes direction, but I think he's a very smooth driver actually, and I think that's particularly suited to Formula E, where it's about, you know, being as efficient as possible with all of your inputs. You know, every bit of a lock up there into 12, but he's still up on the first 2 sectors, about a 10th and a half, as you mentioned, Jack. See if he can get through the chicane. Someone else is locked up. I think earlier there's a bit of smoke from the car in front of him, but pretty neat and tidy there. So this should take him up, and he does, to 27.2. That's a strong lap.
Yeah, 2/10 clear of Oliver Rowland. Nick Cassidy's done a good first sector, just 800ths away from Antonio Felix da Costa. There is De Vries in the pit lane for a tyre change, which again is quite a sort of rare thing to see actually in the pit lane too. Here is Cassidy, who took pole position in the last race in Rome, spun out at the safety car start. Envision were looking into whether it was a braking issue but the brakes can feel quite different, can't they, at the start of the race? Oh, very deep into the chicane there. But when you don't have the regen, it's sort of a totally different beast under braking at the start of a race.
Yeah, exactly. You know, he about 8th at the moment, 8/10 down, so that's quite some way down on da Costa's time. Yeah, listen, he got caught out. Whether it was a car issue or a regen issue, a brake balance issue, for whatever reason, it caught him out. You know, he was obviously able to continue afterwards, so, you know, it was just something at that stage. It could just be cold, you know, the way the cold brakes are combined with obviously the motor working on the rear axle for the regen, just and a bumpy surface. Let's be honest, it was pretty bumpy into that braking zone. So the combination of all of those things just caught him out. But you know, he'll learn and live to fight another day. Gunther on a good lap here. He had a very good first sector, fastest of anybody. A solid middle sector, 31.3 middle sector as well. So clearly in the hunt to be somewhere near. Oh, lock up into that chicane, and it pushed him wide for the second apex. So I think he would have lost some time in that final sector. He still goes second, but I think he compromised his line. Bird has a lock up as well into that chicane. He was down on da Costa's time in the first 2 sectors, so I don't think he's going to be a challenger for the top. And in fact, no, down in 12th.
Jean-Eric Vergne's done the fastest middle sector of anyone. He's less than a 10th away from his teammate Antonio Felix da Costa's time. Only 1 points finish this season for Vergne, but it was the race win in the first race in Rome. Locks up coming into the chicane. Really, really tricky under braking by the looks of it there. And Vergne comes across the line and slots into 4th place. 2/10 away from Antonio Felix da Costa. The top 10 separated by 0.6 of a second. Mitch Evans coming across the line further back. He goes a second slower than Antonio Felix da Costa. Jaguar struggled here a little bit in pre-season testing, so interested to see whether they've managed to hook it up since then. It doesn't look like it with Bird in 14th and Evans down in 20th. Here's Sergio Sette Camara. Checker flag is out. Sette Camara's always an exciting driver to watch. There's always something going on. He's always a bit sideways or a bit on the edge. It's great. And he's the only one not to lock up into the chicane, although it didn't really hook up the first part.
Yeah, exactly. He went super wide, didn't he, in that first part? And then, yeah, that completely compromised his line. He's gone P13. So who are our surprises, we think, here? I mean, Degrassi, Freins, way down in the times at the moment. Maybe didn't get a lap in properly.
Yeah, but there's no real... It's quite interesting. There's no real reason why they wouldn't have been able to get a lap in, you would have thought, because there's so much space out there, and traffic is not really seeming to be an issue.
And Rast is down only in 18th, so actually both Audis, you know, 9/10 off for Rast, 1.2 for Degrassi. Here is Jev with that big lockup into the chicane. Wasn't the first and won't be the last, obviously, from the rest of today. But yeah, I think, you know, so far you'd have to say DS Techeetah should be pretty chuffed with that. You know, both cars in the top 4. I think you know, Jev's lap was compromised by that lockup there quite clearly. But I think at this early stage of the weekend, you know, Mercedes EQ as well. You know, Van Dorn went for the lap a little bit earlier, didn't he, compared to some others?
Do you think that would have made much difference, more so here than on a street track, or?
No, I don't think so. You know, it makes a bigger difference on a street track because it's cleaning up more and more. But even on this track, there will be some effect. You know, certainly you can, just in terms of track cleaning, you know, they've had a lot of rain in the last week here. You know, and just having these cars run around, cleaning up the racing line a bit will make an effect.
Worth pointing out that some of those drivers might have had their lap times deleted for track limits. Robin Freins, I know, did. That's why he's down in 22nd position in the end. So that might be an issue for some of the drivers and why they don't look super representative. I think Jaguar, honestly, are my big, not concern, but not looking particularly strong after that session. Sam Bird 8/10 away, Evans a second away from Antonio Felix da Costa's benchmark time, and Jaguar arrive here as the championship leaders. Obviously another half an hour of practice to come, and maybe they all had their own stories to tell from when they tried to do their fast laps, but not looking right at the sharp end at the moment, Jaguar, after those first runs. There's Van Dorn and Sete Camara going into the first corner, having done their practice starts. Is it just...
I think the start here is going to be massively important, more than the street tracks, because, you know, in the street tracks where it's a bit narrow, when you all launch off the line, even if you don't get as good a start, frankly, the cars behind sometimes don't have anywhere to go. Yeah. Whereas on this circuit, I think it's going to be really important. You could just see from this shot we're getting from up above, you can have 3 or 4 wide. So actually, and then you've got the run to turn 2 as well. And I suspect they'll turn a little bit of a blind eye about track limits on the outside of turn 1 on the opening lap. So I think that the start this weekend is going to be much more important than on a street circuit.
Interesting. There goes René Rast and Alexander Sims away, down towards the first corner. But as the teams and drivers do their practice starts at the end of the first practice session of the DHL Valencia E-Prix, this is how it ended up. Antonio Felix da Costa at the top of the times, a 1:27.238, the reigning champion up there in first place. The two DS Techeetahs both looking strong, first and fourth for he and Jean-Eric Verne. Max Günther in second, Oliver Rowland in third, one of the most impressive qualifiers of the year, really. Rowland looking like he might be quite quick in the Nissan Edams. His teammate Sebastian Buemi down in 7th place. The Mercedes looking strong with Van Dorn there in 5th, Nick de Vries in 8th, also Eduardo Mortara, the Mercedes-powered Rocket Venturi car, in 6th position. And you got the two Mahindras in 10th and 11th, the Tagoya Porsche of Pascal Wehrlein completing the top 12. Sergio Sete Camara down in 13th place. Look at that, a second covering, well, pretty much the whole field, down to Mitch Evans in 21st spot for Jaguar. Tom Blomqvist quite a way off the pace, but maybe you would presume didn't get a proper lap in, because Oliver Turvey is up in 16th. So, first practice session done around the Valencia E-Prix circuit. Everybody now making their way back to the pit lane. They see Oliver Rowland getting wheeled back in. They'll now have a couple of hours to debrief and assess what they can do differently. And still the weather is holding off as well. At the moment, it's looking fairly clear out there. So is that what they're going to be hoping for? Do you think the drivers will want a nice dry race?
I think ultimately it is what it is. I always think, you know, with the weather, it just is what it is. You can't change it. Like, what are you going to do? Put a big canopy over the track? It rains. So I stop worrying about it, really. You know, you just, if it rains, and you deal with it as best as you can at that time.
Eduardo Mortara getting out of the car and going to get weighed in the FIA garage. His teammate Norman Nato, and Nato's car in there already. René Rast, who after a strong start to the season with a 4th place in Diriyah and the fastest lap, had a 6th place in Rome, and that's sort of it. So he's down in 11th place. He'll be going out in Group 2, qualifying later on this afternoon. And we'll see whether he and Audi can start to score some points, really, that the pace that they feel the pace in the car deserves. And of course, you can get involved as well using Fan Boost. Vote for your favorite driver. They'll get an extra 100 kilojoules of energy that they can then deploy at full 250 kilowatts of power. You can vote online at FIAFormula.com/fanboost or scan the QR code on the right. Vandoorne, Da Costa, De Grassi, Turvey and Bird, the top 5. Turvey's getting a lot of love in the Fan Boost. Wow. Don't well, maybe I'm doing Oliver a disservice here, but I don't remember him being particularly big in Fan Boost very often. But maybe after his escapades in Rome, you guys like him. I'm here for it. I like it getting mixed up. Obviously, you got Vandoorne and Da Costa up at the top. So first free practice session for the Valencia E-Prix underway in the dark morning of Saturday. The 2 DS Techeetahs straight out on circuit doing some slipstream testing. Bit of a lockup for Nick Cassidy as he came through into turn 9. Sebastian Buemi would show some reasonable pace, ending the session's 7th quickest, about a 1/10 of a second slower than his teammate Oliver Rowland. Robin Freitz was off the track quite a few times at the first corner. Tyre management, one of the interesting things about this weekend because of it being a more permanent facility. And that was René Rast. Wow, he's gone very wide there. Is that at turn 1? His teammate Lucas Di Grassi kicking up the gravel as well. Big lock up for Turvey. Jake Dennis looking to pick up his first points of the season for the BMW Andretti team. And Eduardo Mortara ended the session fairly strongly with a 6th place, only 3/10 of a second slower than Antonio Felix da Costa. Freitz off the track again, down at turn 1. Lock up for De Grassi. The Brazilian ended the session down in 23rd place, 1.2 seconds off the pace of this man, Antonio Felix da Costa, who despite that lock up into 12, ended the session quickest of anyone on a 1 minute 27.238. We saw plenty of lockups into the chicane at the end of the session when they were all going for their full power laps, but no one could beat Antonio Felix da Costa, the reigning champion, at the top of the times. There's his teammate Jean-Eric Vergne, who ended the session 4th quickest. Things looking good for DS Techeetah. Maybe some questions to be asked at the Jaguar Racing team. Mitch Evans looking at the timing screens maybe with a little bit of trepidation as he ended it down in 21st position. Make sure you join us for free practice 2. Just another half hour of practice before we get going with qualifying later on this afternoon. The race gets underway at 3 o'clock local time.